Welcome to episode 1 of What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. My name's Wes, and this is the intro.
So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
Do you ever feel like you're living in two separate worlds? Like, you have your world at home, and then you have your world, like, at school or on your team or in the band? I do things at home that I would never do in public, like wear t-shirts with holes in them, or really short shorts, or put peanut butter on pickles, or burp really loud. See, we all act and react in ways at home that we never would out in our other worlds. Why is that? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but for me, the primary one is I see my home as my world and everybody else is just living in it. It's our world and we want it our way, but we don't act that way anywhere else. We cop attitudes with our parents and our siblings at home that we would never cop with our friends or teachers at school. And if we're really honest, home sometimes feels like the only place where we can be the realist version of ourselves. The problem is that with the realist version of ourselves, sometimes comes the ugly version of ourselves. Think about it. No matter what's going on at home, I always ask myself the question, how does this affect me when mom's work schedule changes and she can't take you to go hang out with your friend later this week? How does this affect me when your sibling has a tournament and your parents decide to go to that one this time and send you with your friends? How does this affect me when your dad wants that one stupid dinner that nobody likes but your mom agrees to cook it for him? Like, how does this affect me? And we continually act and react based on that one question, whether we're aware of it or not, which creates this kind of ugly cycle. Things happen, we react based on how it's affecting us, and then our actions affect the people in our families and in our lives. And then they react based on how that affects them. And so you got this ugly loop of action, reaction. What if you know that you might be part of the reason why things are so tense at home, but you just don't know what to do? Like, you don't need me to tell you that family is hard sometimes, and that this has been going on for thousands of years. See, over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about this guy named Joseph. We're going to be looking at what he did when he didn't know what to do. Now, Joseph is a guy just like us. In fact, in Genesis chapter 37, we find out he's probably about 17. We also find out that he is the youngest of all his brothers. His father, Israel, likes him the best. We find out really early in the chapter that Joseph's dad has given him this magnificent coat, a very special gift for the favorite son. And this kind of rubbed his brothers the wrong way. In fact, his brothers are so irritated that the text says that they could not even say a nice word to him. We're going to pick the story up in verse 5 of Genesis chapter 37. Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field." Now, sheaf of grain is like a group of grain. That's how in the ancient world you would collect grain and be able to move it into like a place for it to be processed and made into bread or pizza or whatever, right? So they were cutting down the wheat and putting it together in a sheaf, when suddenly, in Joseph's dream, his sheaf rose and stood upright, while the other sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. So there's some metaphor going on in this dream. What he's saying is, hey, my sheaf stood up straight, and your sheaves bowed down to my sheaf. This seems a little sketchy for us in 2020, but the message was really clear to his brothers, and they responded, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Now remember, Joseph was the youngest brother, meaning he was the least likely to inherit property or to be in any sort of status in society. It didn't mean he was a lesser person, it just meant he had less status than his older brothers. So for him to say, hey guys, I had a dream where I was better than you, was not only countercultural, it was kind of mean. See, the trouble with a story like this is we see a character like Joseph, who we know is the hero, and we assume that everything he does is good, or that everything he does is licensed or approved by God. And that's very rarely the case in a story like this one. Actually, what the author of this story is trying to do is to show us, and we'll look at this over the entire story of Joseph, but show us that when somebody messes up, God can still use them down the road. And this is very clearly a mistake on Joseph's part. But while that dream may have been valid and from God, he's not caring about how it will affect his brothers. From another angle, we take a look at Joseph's dad, Israel, and we see that not only does he show preferential treatment to one son above the rest, he doesn't do anything to stop or correct or to kind of change or help the family dynamic. He doesn't correct Joseph for being kind of a little brat. He doesn't correct the brothers when they refuse to say nice things about Joseph. He doesn't sort of deal with the conflict inside the family. The lesson that the author is trying to teach us is to pay attention to how your words and actions affect those around you. Specifically, pay attention to how your words affect the people in your family. Or maybe even simpler, pay attention to how you affect your family. And equally important, the author is trying to illustrate here that any conflict left unresolved will just get worse down the road. As this story unfolds, you'll see exactly where that tension between Joseph and his brother leads. And spoiler alert, it's not pretty. See, Joseph's family drama isn't all that different from any of ours. Another guy who followed Jesus named Paul, a few thousand years later, wrote a letter to a group of people in a place called Philippi. And in chapter 2, he encourages them to take on the same mindset of Jesus, who, being in his very likeness God, did not consider his deity something to be grasped or held onto, but rather he surrendered it and humbled himself to death on a cross for our benefit. What Jesus is inviting us into is not just to understand how we affect the people in our family. What Jesus is inviting us into is to living a life where the first question is not, how does that affect me? The first question becomes, how does that affect them? And then we act accordingly. One of the great lies about our time is that we can say things and do things and make choices that only affect us, when in reality, there has never ever been a choice or a word or an action taken that does not affect someone else. How you affect the people in your life, specifically the people in your family, really does matter. This is why we have Trinity groups, by the way, because we know that each and every one of us need people in our life that will tell us the truth, that will tell us the ways we're acting and interacting with the people around us, the places where we need to be a little more like Jesus and a little less self-centered. Man, can you imagine a world where people paid a little less attention to themselves and a little more attention to the people around them? You imagine the things that would be different? See, our step today in helping one another follow Jesus is just paying attention to the ways we affect the people in our lives. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.